Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, wherever you're calling from across the nation. Thank you so much for being here today. This is the October training, except today we're not calling it a training, we're calling it a workshop. So we're going to get our hands on the tools, on the dashboards, and in the reporting services that we have. And hopefully we can make some good progress today. I want to thank Mr. Josh Legler for being with us today as well and being my co-host in this presentation.
Thanks, Monet.
So we're going to go ahead and get started, jump right in. Please feel free to ask questions, lots of questions. All right. Today our agenda is we're going to cover the state data set, the demographic data set, and the Schematron checker, the state data submission dashboard, and the submission lag dashboard, only briefly. So first, I want to mention, for those of you who may have forgotten, the state data set tells the agencies what to collect. And one of the things I've noticed is that we have several states at the moment who have not identified their state required elements. I'm going to show you today how we can get that accomplished. We're also going to talk a little bit more about the facility list, and we're going to talk about custom element, populating those custom elements. So the first thing I want you guys to do, you ladies and gentlemen, to do is we're going to utilize a workaround to get onto the NEMSIS reporting tools. We're actually going to go first to the Tableau server, and I've indicated the address here. So if you are able, if you have two monitors, go ahead and log on to the Tableau server. You're going to use your user name, which is your first initial last name, and then you're going to use your password that you have established for that user account. And it's the same username and password as if you were logging into the NEMSIS website. So I need a couple of people to give me a thumbs up when you have that done. Right on, I see some thumbs. Thank you so much. Right on, hi Mike. Okay, now we're gonna talk about the state data set builder. So just give me a hands if you want me to actually show you on the website how to get to this. I actually think that the instructions here might be sufficient, but that's just my assumption. What you do is you're going to go to the navigation tabs that say state reports. Let me actually do that. Let me go to the state data set builder with you. So I'm going to click on this link here. So we're going to go to view reports, and we're going to go to the last link on the bottom that says state data set builder. And then the first link on this page is the builder. And I want you to recognize that you are actually going to see the word builder in the title here in the blue. And then what you need to do is you need to select your state. If you already have a state data set on your state page and in the NEMSIS repository, it's going to say that you already have a document available. And if you want to load that document, and you should hit OK. Now I'm going to go ahead and minimize this and get back to my presentation. And so your page should look just like this. I just want to confirm that several of you already have this page up. Give me a thumbs up, Kevin. Perfect. All right. So what we need to do is look at your list and see what you have available. If you're missing your state collected elements, in this case, I was working with Ridgely Fix in Massachusetts, and she populated her information. So we are currently seeing that she has 269 elements. Now, if in your state you currently do not see any state selected or collected elements, this is what we need to work on. And so I'm going to go back to that particular page, and I'm going to show you how we're going to accomplish that. the state that I'm actually going to choose, I should have had this open. I'm going to choose Puerto Rico because I am anticipating that Puerto Rico will soon be submitting data to the National Repository. So everybody give me a whoop whoop for Puerto Rico coming aboard. And what we're going to do is just go to the state required elements. And when I initially opened this, it said this is the first time that we're opening or selecting these elements. So I played with this on yesterday, and you can see here that I have selected the state recommended elements. And so it selected all of the national elements and the state elements. They're indicated with the red box and the yellow box. And if there is an instance where the state is not collecting one of these elements, say for instance, they're not collecting agency, county, and country, then we can just deselect that element. And we can continue to deselect any of the elements that they're not collecting. Once you've decided and huddled with your group in your office and confirm what elements you're collecting, you can save this. Once you save this document, it's going to ask you to download it. You can click on the download. It's going to create an XML document. And this is the document that you send to us. And once you send it to us, we will post it on the NEMSIS website. Now, this is a user interface tool that allows you to play with this as much as you need to. So if you make changes and if you need to revisit this page multiple times, that's okay. It's not finalized until you send it to us for posting. And even if you send it to us and there's an error, you can simply redo the document and send it to us again. So we want you to, get in here and utilize this tool and populate this as much as you need to. I'm going to take a pause and ask if there are any questions. If you have a question, go ahead and come off mute and ask your question about this. Okay, so I know how many states are missing this particular information. I would love to see several documents sent to us this week. I'm anticipating that you all will, try to get this done, and this is going to help your data quality. All right, we're going to go ahead and leave this particular screen, and we're just going to continue with the presentation. So the next item I have listed here are the facilities, and we talked about this in the last V3 implementation call. We have several states that are also using codes from neighboring states. And what we want to encourage you to do is, if you're utilizing codes from a neighboring state, simply go to that state. Because this is all public information. You can look at your neighbor's state. You can look at your neighboring state's information, and you can simply copy the same codes and the addresses and the GPS code information. You can copy that information from your neighboring state and add it to your list rather than creating new codes. So we want to really try and make some adjustments with this. And if you notice that you have let's say 2,000 facilities and you're in your state, actually you're not transporting to 2,000, that means that you may want to go ahead and clean this up. One other thing I'm going to mention about this is you can see here that her version date is 9/1 of 2021, which is excellent because that means she's recently updated this information. Now, if your date is from 2018 or 2019 or even last year, more than likely there's been some changes in your state as it relates to your, your facility information or your agency information or any of this information. So go ahead and do a little adjusting of your list here so that it can continue to improve your data quality. And the other thing I will mention is as we're moving to version 3.5, this legwork, the work that you're doing now to create this information is going to greatly save you time when you're trying to transition to the 3.5 standard. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on from this unless anyone has a question. I see something in the chat. Let me check that really quick.
I think that was me just putting links in.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. All right, let me get on here. All right, so in the facility survey information that we conducted recently, we saw that the question was asked, what source do you use to populate your state information, or sorry, your facility information? And so many of you said that you're using your license management system or some other state resource. Continue to use those lists, and that will help your vendors, because currently we have vendors that are making up codes and making up addresses, or they'll have one facility with 10 different addresses and 10 different spellings, and that's creating some problems for your internal reports. Then other states have a mixed bag of processes for getting their information. So the best source would probably be some official list that's coming from other agencies within your state. 43 states indicated that they have a facility list, but at least 7 of those states that responded to the survey are still missing a facility list. And so I have reached out to everyone to see if I could provide some assistance. And truly, this should take maybe about 15 minutes or maybe 30 minutes, but I'm just asking for between 15 and 30 minutes of your time to help you populate this information. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the custom elements. This is just an example of how the custom elements, again, this is Massachusetts, and my friend Ridgely decided she wanted to add a custom element for eVitals 30. Now, one of the things that we talked about is looking at the National Custom Elements Library to find out if there was actually a custom element already created for this particular extension of the stroke scale type is race. And so we found a state that had a custom element and it was created correctly. We saw some that were a little different, but this is the best example here that I'm showing you today. And what I want to explain is that in the version 3.4.0 standard, we did not include the stroke scale type race. So this state used the NEMSIS code. This is what we're calling a roll-up code. They used this code, which is other. It is equal to other. And then the description that they used was race. So whenever you're creating custom elements, we just want to remind you, where applicable, please use a NEMSIS rollup code. And in most cases, it will be listed as other. If you need additional help on custom elements, let's have a private one-on-one conversation about that, or a webinar, and we can review this information with you during that time. Let's talk a little bit about the DEM file information. This is short for demographic, for the agency demographic information. We're trying to address this issue with failed submissions. And many of the failed submissions that are coming in right now is related to the agency demographic file. So we asked this question: what are your requirements for the agencies to complete the demographic files? State requirement, the states require agencies to submit the DEM files. 18 states responded. 6 states responded that the state does not require the agencies to submit the DEM files. And then another 9 states said that the state allows the agencies to submit the DEM files, but do not require them to do so. Josh, did you want to add anything about option B?
What we've heard in the past is that there were quite a few states that were actually telling their agencies not to submit their demographic data through a NEMSIS web services submission. And so they had various other methods. Maybe the agency would have to use the state system directly to record their agency information, or the state would record that information in the state system directly, but the agency was not involved. And so as we look at the results from this survey, it's good to see that there are actually quite a few states now that are requiring their agencies to submit agency demographic data from their local system to the state, and several others that are, if not requiring it, at least accepting it. And so that's a great progress in a good direction, and that's kind of what I'll be talking about here for a few minutes. So Monet, is it all right if I switch things over and pick it up from there?
Absolutely. Go for it.
Okay, let's see. Oh, I guess you'll have to stop your screen sharing and then I can do mine. Okay. All right, so want to take some time to talk about using demographic data to improve the data quality in your state systems, in the data that you're getting. You might recall these slides that I shared from the NEMSIS annual meeting when I talked about demographic data. I illustrated this particular scenario here where maybe an agency has set up to transport patients to 12 different hospitals or other facilities that they take people to. And they've done a good job overall of setting up those facilities using the information the state has provided. So they've used the right facility code, the right name, address, et cetera. Except for one of those 12 hospitals, they got it wrong. They maybe typoed a facility code or spelled the name differently or something like that. So as they set up those 12 hospitals in their software at the local agency level, and then they start going on calls, they start transporting patients to these various 12 hospitals. And what happens is that most of these patients go to somewhere that was a hospital that they had set up correctly, and that's great. But every once in a while, they transport to that one facility that they had set up incorrectly. And when they send their data to the state system, what happens is you get lots of records where everything looks good and clean. They went to facilities that they'd set up correctly. But every once in a while, you get a record in your state system where the information about the destination that they transported to, there's something wrong about that information, the wrong code or wrong name or address or something. And this bad data gets sprinkled throughout all of the good data in your state data system. And it gets a little tough to catch and a little tough to fix at this stage of the game, because it means you need to ask that agency to resubmit. They need to correct the issue, and then they need to resubmit all of those records that had the bad data. They may just choose to resubmit, a whole year's worth of data. Who knows? It might not be easy for them to just resubmit the ones that they made fixes on. So it gets pretty messy to clean up data quality kind of post hoc in patient care reports. It's a lot easier to clean up that data quality when you can tackle it in their initial agency setup, and that's their demographic data. So you might recall at the boot camp, at the annual meeting, we went through these slides of, where's the best place to catch these mistakes? You've got one configuration in your state data set. The agency configures that hospital differently. Then you get a sprinkling of PCRs with that wrong hospital data. Of course, the easiest place to catch this is where the agency has deviated from the state data set. Or this example, your state recognizes certain license levels. Maybe it's all the 2009 levels. The agency is setting up a bunch of their personnel with EMT basic or EMT paramedic levels. So then when they submit patient care reports, they've got crew members going on calls that are at those basic or EMTP levels that are not the levels that your state actually licenses. Again, a sprinkling of bad data among lots of good data in the PCRs. Easier to catch it in their demographic data, where they give you their personnel list and tell you what levels their people are licensed at. And so I kind of set forth this vision of where we are today versus in the future, that as we move forward, the vision here is that demographic data would be completed by the agency. and it would be submitted to the state through the automated processes of web services, and that it would be submitted and updated frequently. That would also flow up to the national database on a regular basis. And that the quality of demographic data would be checked and improved, whereas nowadays, oftentimes it's just like the quality isn't really checked much. As I presented that, and as you've kind of had time over the past couple of months to be working on things in your states, have you run into any challenges that you see you're going to need to address before we can kind of realize this future vision? Any issues that you're running into in your states that are going to kind of slow down this idea of accepting demographic data and checking it for data quality?
Briefly wrote something in the chat about DIM files overwrite things incorrectly.
Yeah, right. That's the primary, I think, at least my personal opinion is that I think that that is the primary reason why some states have not allowed agencies to submit demographic data through web services. It's because their state system has not processed that data very well. And so they end up with weird changes to the data that they didn't want, like allowing the agency to change its name through a demographic submission, or lots of duplicates. They update something on a personnel record, it ends up creating a duplicate personnel record. And so there's some good progress in NEMSIS 3.5 to help vendors implement that processing better so that they'll avoid that situation of getting lots of duplicates. And so, yeah, that'll be, that'll be one of the challenges that'll be largely on the state level vendors to improve that particular part of the process. Originally also said it's not in our administrative requirement to submit. So that's interesting. Originally, are your agencies required to submit PCRs, but just not demographic data? Okay. Yeah, so that may be a change for some states, that maybe your administrative rules or even statute were written with patient care report data in mind and not with agency demographic data in mind as that other key data set in the NEMSIS standard. So that, of course, involves changes to rules and laws, which can take a while. Anne said our issue was primarily the duplicate crew members. Yeah, I assume you're meaning the personnel in the demographic data. So they update a person's name or birth date or something, and all of a sudden now you've got two of that person in your state system when they submit that update. And let's see, Pennsylvania, Kaylin said that Pennsylvania doesn't require demographic data either. And I run into issues with vendors when asking them to assist agencies. I'll either not receive a response or be told they will, and then they don't. Okay, so that speaks to some responsibilities that the vendors of local products also have to clean up this situation and realize this vision. The local level vendors have some work to do. I've especially seen, in my work with the state of Oregon, they require demographic data from agencies. And data quality in the demographic data has been really pretty bad, frankly. We see much better data quality in the PCR data. And partly that's because we have them fix all their data quality issues while we're reviewing demographic data, but they start out very messy, very much not in compliance with the state's requirements. And so there's a lot of work to be done there at the local vendor level. And let's see, Anne said we don't require, but we have them fill it in on their application to get access to the system, and then we enter it. Just the mandatory agency data, like, yeah, I'm assuming like level of service and type of service provided, some of that mandatory stuff. Yeah, and so then the downfall is that you don't see what they configured in their local system, and their local system configuration may not match what it should be. And then you get patient care report data based on some bad configuration in the local system.
Josh,
right, great.
Josh,
go ahead.
This is Judy in Texas. What I'm seeing on the weekly reports is that the DEM files that have failed have a missing EMS agency number. But when I go and check the question packages in our system, both D agency 01 and 02 are complete. So I don't know if they're missing something on their file that they're submitting, or I don't know. I can't tell what's going on.
Are you talking about the reports that you receive weekly from the NEMSIS TAC?
Correct.
Okay, yeah. So what you're probably seeing there is that there were some patient care reports that your state sent to the national database, and the national database rejected them because the national database had not yet received the agency demographic data for the agencies that created those patient care reports. So the way to address that would be, you'll, as you noted, if you look at the patient care report, you do see D agency 1 and 2 in the data there that represents the agency that report was from. You'll need to make sure that your state system submits demographic data for that agency to the national database, and then you can resubmit those PCRs and the national database will accept them.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great question. Great, thanks everyone for the discussion on that question of challenges of moving toward this overall vision. Any other comments before we move on?
Yeah, Josh, this is Anne, sorry, because I can't type this fast. So one other thing that I've noticed when I can't remember what I was working on, but the vendors themselves, and we, not just the state vendor sending to you guys, so that's also one of the issues, but the agencies sending to us, at least as far as one of the vendors goes, there's no automatic trigger when an agency changes. I don't know, just something simple, like say they get, in our state, they'd have to get a CON and they can now bill for services. So if they change billing from no to yes, it doesn't automatically send. And I can see that if we don't accept the file, but what I thought was interesting is even if I change it in my system, it doesn't automatically send. So I'll have ePCRs going over and they'll fail because there's no demographic file, but it won't automatically send just because I've updated the thing that needed to be filled in so that the EMS files can be accepted. So that, I think that's kind of an issue. That's a lot of steps to try to get done. It should just send automatically, I think, when there's an update to the DEM file, but that's, unless there's an issue with that, I don't know.
I've also seen that as a widespread issue, both at the local and state level, like you mentioned. So lots of local software products that they have not automated the sending of demographic data. They've only automated PCR data sending. So the agency has to remember to push some button somewhere to resend their demographic data. And then, as you noted, in state systems, I've seen that issue as well, where the agency submits an update, or like you said, you manually make a change to the agency demographics, and your state system just doesn't do it. That doesn't trigger anything in your state system. It doesn't trigger your state system to resend those demographics for that agency to the national database. And so that is definitely something that vendors need to work on, both at the local and state level products, to make sure those are sent in an automated way.
Is that something that's standard, or is that something you guys at least, or maybe test for as a recommended compliance feature?
Yeah, Laurel just added it in the chat here. This is a requirement currently in 3.4 as well as 3.5. So the requirement has already been in place for many years that it should be an automated submission within 24 hours of a change being made. So if you make a change to demographics in an agency today, then within the next 24 hours, your system should send an update to the next system upstream. Laurel also noted that the vendors have asserted that their software has that capability in their compliance testing experience. And of course, as you and I have seen, Anne, there are definitely some vendors that have only done it as like a manual step that rather than triggered as an automated step. So yeah, definitely some progress needs to be made there. Ridgely asked, can they send a DEM file without crew? So in other words, send all of the agency demographic data, but not the personnel list. The standard allows for that. The personnel section is technically optional in the standard. So you would be able to create a valid export even without personnel data in the demographic data set. You'd have to check with local level vendors on what kind of configuration they offer to their customers to specifically exclude that data from an export. Different vendors may or may not be able to support that sort of tailored configuration. You triggered something else I was going to say about that. Oh yeah, one thing also that I've talked about with state level vendors is that they really need to provide a more refined configuration for how the state system processes demographic data coming into it. So for example, as a state data manager, it would be nice for me to be able to say that when I receive demographic data from a local agency, I will not process changes to the agency name because they need to come through the licensing process in my EMS licensing office to change their name. Or maybe I will validate their facility data, but not process it into my state system, or various things like that, to decide what you're going to process and what you're not. And so that's really, I think, a future capability of state systems that would be very helpful for states. But it's certainly not required for compliance. Compliance just checks that they are able to process everything that comes in the demographic data. But that configuration, I think, would be helpful and doesn't tend to exist much today. Okay, great discussion, everyone. Let's go on to, to kind of summarize that discussion. At the annual meeting, I had a couple recommendations for 3 different stakeholders in the NEMSIS environment. One was state vendors. So the vendors of state level products, which I just mentioned, allow the states to configure what and how demographic data is processed when it comes in from agencies, and to automate that submission to the national database. And down at the bottom, I also had recommendations for agency level vendors to improve their validation of agency demographic data and to automate their submissions to the state. So we've touched on those. I want to touch on 2 recommendations that I had for states. One was to accept demographic data from agencies, which we've talked about, and we're seeing some good progress there. The other is to publish Schematron rules for demographic data. This will help you to ensure the quality of this data if you are accepting it into your system. Currently, 3 states have published Schematron rules for demographic data. In a way, this is not terribly surprising because all of the software products just have had a lot more attention paid to setting up validation rules for patient care reports. And this setting up validation rules for demographic data is an overlooked area in your software products. And so there's probably not a surprise that it's overlooked by everyone, really. But what can we do about that? I would encourage you to look at setting up some basic validation rules for demographic data coming into your system. And I've listed a few just kind of ideas here of things that you could validate. You could check the medication and procedure lists for an agency to make sure they're using the medication and procedure codes that your state recognizes and allows EMTs, EMRs, paramedics, et cetera, to use. You could check personnel license number formats. That's a very state-specific thing. For example, here in Oregon, it's a 6-digit number for licensed personnel, and then a little bit different format for medical directors' licenses. You can also check license levels on personnel lists. You can check facility codes, names, et cetera. We've touched on that. If you can check that in demographic data, you can catch the problem up front. You can also do uniqueness checks so that you can make sure that they're not giving you duplicate personnel, duplicate vehicles. There's kind of the separate issue of not having these duplicates being created in your state system as a result of processing demographic data. But you can at least do a uniqueness check on the incoming data to make sure they're not giving you the same vehicle twice or something. So there's a few ideas. And then I would also suggest that you could look for ideas by looking at the 3 states that have already published rules for demographic data. Let me take you quickly out to the Schematron library. The Schematron library is available. I guess I should show you the menus first through the technical resources menu on the NEMSIS website. And when you get to the Schematron library, one thing you can do is you can just look at all the rules for DEM Dataset by clicking on DEM Dataset. And so you'll see that Oregon, New York, and Nebraska have rules for demographic data. And you could look through the rules that they've published and just get ideas about things that might be valuable for you to check in demographic data coming into your state. Okay, let's see. There was a question from originally in the chat. How do you check for unique personnel? People could have the same name and their state ID could change. Same person works for multiple agencies. So in validating demographic data, it's going to be a demographic data submission from a single agency. So you're going to be looking for duplicates within the agency. The same person might work for other agencies, but you're looking for duplicates within a single agency when you do this check. And so you could look at probably state license number would be the best way to go, because most states use that as sort of a key for identifying personnel. So if the agency has submitted a personnel list to you, and there are 2 personnel on the list that both have the same state ID, then that's a problem. That doesn't exist in real life. So that would be a duplicate that you could flag. You said that their state IDs could change. Yes, they could change. And so this is talking about duplicates, though. 2 people with the same license number, that would be a problem, and you could flag that with a Schematron validation rule. Okay, great. All right, I want to talk just for a minute about refining your validation rules to improve data quality. So we talked about demographic data. I'm going to kind of switch the focus back to PCR data now. And one issue that we run into that we'd like you to think about, especially as state data managers, is something like this here. Someone is using whatever product they use. They've deployed your state Schematron rules. They've deployed the national Schematron rules in their local level product, and they're filling out their PCR, and their product is working well. It's showing them validation rules that are being triggered as they go. And so they get here and they put cardiac arrest, yes, prior to EMS arrival. Let's see. Yeah, and sorry, I messed up on my example here. I put in a no for resuscitation attempt. Let's pretend resuscitation attempted by EMS is blank. Okay, so they said there was cardiac arrest, but they didn't say whether resuscitation was attempted. And since they left it blank, so ignore that no there, they're leaving it blank, and they get 2 validation messages about this. And one of them says the same thing that the other says, just in slightly different words. So the first validation rule came from the national Schematron rules. And the second one came from their state. Well, their state, this rule published by their state is redundant with that existing national Schematron rule. So the end user of this particular product ends up seeing two messages that are actually telling them the same thing. It just gives them more to wade through as they try to figure out how to clean up their report. There is a way that you can check to see if your state rules are being redundant with national rules that already exist. And that is the state Schematron checker. So I want to show you that and show you how you can use that checker report to identify potential duplicate rules, redundant rules in your state Schematron rules. So let me head out to the NEMSIS website again, or not to the NEMSIS website, sorry. Let me put this in the chat. This is a tool that the NEMSIS TAC has been using internally for a few years, and it could be useful for state data managers as well. It doesn't yet have a link to it on the NEMSIS homepage or anywhere on the NEMSIS website, so I just put that link in the chat. I'm going to show you what this Schematron validator does. I'm going to choose Connecticut's Schematron file for patient care report data. And what it does is it just checks that the Schematron file itself is valid, which it is. And then it has this state Schematron checker, and it has a report that it shows you. And what it does is it shows you things that are potentially redundant with national requirements. So for example, maybe I'll blow this up some if I can. Okay. For example, in Connecticut, they have a rule that says type of service requested is a mandatory field. Well, that is true. In fact, the XML schema, or XSD, has that as a mandatory field. So if type of service was not recorded on some data coming into your state system, then it would fail XSD validation. And it would never even run Schematron validation, and this warning would never get triggered in Schematron validation. And that's because that's an XSD requirement that's checked first. So these rules here, some of these are potentially just unnecessary to have in your state Schematron file because they're just redundant with something that gets checked already. Now, the Schematron checker report is fairly rough. It's just giving you kind of hints here. So for example, this one, unit notified by dispatch time is too early. Yeah, that is a mandatory element in the national XSD, but this particular rule is not really being redundant with that. So it got flagged here in the checker, but it's not one you'd necessarily need to take action on. But these three rules up here are all about something being mandatory. Those could be removed from the state Schematron file with no negative impact. There's a second section that lists rules that are similar to existing national rules. Again, this is a fairly rough cut report here. It just gives potentials, but I'll look down to, like this AED use, or maybe, yeah, CPR care provided prior to EMS arrival. There's a rule from the state that looks like it's probably redundant with national rules that already exist. And so what'll happen here then is all of these rules would get triggered. The end user might see two messages that are really telling them the same thing. So that's the Schematron checker report. And so you can grab that URL from the chat. All right, so, oh, good, Monet, thanks for that link in the chat. It is also listed in the best practices for state and territory resources. Good, okay. There's a place you'll be able to get to it. Okay, I'll pause again. Any challenges in this idea of refining your state Schematron rules to not be redundant with national requirements and rules? Okay, the one I usually hear is that states have direct data entry into their state system, and they need end users of that system to see these warnings or errors. And that is true. So you can have that rule in your state system, but you can choose not to export it to your Schematron file that you share with other products. So fairly straightforward workaround for that one. Great. Well, I'm going to turn it back over to Monet Monet, I'll stop sharing my screen and let you take it back.
Thanks, Josh. Okay, so y'all should be able to see my screen now. Yes, no?
Yes,
maybe?
looks good.
Okay. All right, let me just make sure okay. So I want to also talk a little bit about, let me just figure out what's going on with my video here, or maybe not. I want to talk a little bit about the state data submission dashboard. What we're going to talk about are the warnings. We're going to drill into the vendor and agency information and then the submission lag. Give me 1 second here. Okay, perfect. All right, so many of you are subscribed to this particular dashboard, and by a show of hands, is there anyone who is a state manager who's not getting this dashboard? Just do a quick thumbs up or a hand raised or something like that so that we can ensure that you have access to this dashboard. We want to, this is sort of like a report, a weekly report card. It's showing you the past 2 weeks of data submissions. In order to get to this dashboard, just follow these instructions. Go to View Reports, State Reports, Version 3 Dashboards, and then look for the Version 3 Data Submission Dashboard. The majority of you are probably receiving this particular dashboard on Tuesday mornings. That's what we have suggested as a day that you can receive this report. And let's just dig right in. So if you're looking at your email summary tab, what you'll see is you'll see your percentages of failed submissions, your active agencies, and your PCR warnings. This is just an example of one state that is doing pretty well. And so I'm going to consider this as a potential goal for every state to try to attain these type of numbers where you're in the green for your failed submission rate, your active agencies, the agencies that you are anticipating that should submit NEMSIS data are doing so, and then the PCR warnings is at a lower percentage. Currently, the national average is about 55%. And so we're going to dig more into this to see what's happening with these warnings. So when you click on the Accepted PCR Detail tab, you will see a page that looks like this. Now, I've minimized some of the information so that I can really show you and present the information where you can really determine what's happening with the warnings. I have hidden the agencies that are responsible for these particular warnings, as well as software vendors. But when you are on this page, you will see this information for your agencies and for your vendors. So what we want to talk about are, let's first look at this area where it says average warnings per PCR element. So e-payment 01. Here's a description at the very bottom that talks about what e-payment 01 is if you're not familiar with that element. It's saying that the primary method of payment should be recorded when incident patient disposition is with transport or a patient treated and transported by this EMS unit. So we know that in some states, this may not be an element that is turned on. But this is why, again, it's important for you to identify what elements your state is collecting, because it's possible that this particular vendor responsible for some of these warnings have not turned this element on, and they're not, the EMS clinician does not even see this element when they're documenting the patient care experience. So if you were to click on the e-payment 01, the entire dashboard would refresh and show you all the agencies that are having trouble with documenting this particular element. We can also click on, say for instance, this first agency number is listed here. If you simply click on the bar, where it's showing this 29%, you would actually get the dashboard to refresh and show you all of the particular elements that that agency is having trouble understanding why it's necessary for that element to be documented or those elements to be documented. And then, of course, your software, your local vendor information would show up here below. And this would be a great time to have a conversation with those local vendor products, the collect data products, to ensure that they are actually implementing your state data sets when those state data sets are updated. What I'm encouraging state managers to do is maybe pick 1 or 2 agencies at a time and schedule some trainings with those particular agency managers and their clinicians, and use this as an opportunity to allow the TAC to also partner with you in these trainings. If you need videos or PowerPoint presentations or any type of educational resources, please reach out to us. We currently have 2 team members working on some educational materials. So this would be a great opportunity for us to help you to reduce that burden of you just doing the training alone, but allow us an opportunity to help you explain this information. Are there any questions about this particular dashboard? Okay, I'm going to move along since I'm running out of time. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the submission lag. If you're looking at that accepted PCR detail tab, you'll see here under this title of patient care report process, you'll see some submission lag times, 25%, 50%, and 75%. Now this information, I want you to look at it and determine if the submission lag times align with your state requirements for record submissions. You'll recall that a few months ago, we sent out a survey, and the survey simply asks, how soon after the ePCR closes do you require the agencies to submit the record? This is just a small screenshot of state responses. Some states says 72 hours, some states says 2 hours, 48 hours, 15 days. You'll be able to determine if there are agencies that this is actually showing the overall state number. But what you want to look for is if this number here or there 25% of the record says 1,500 or some outrageous number, then maybe this is where you're going to dig in and see how you can get your agencies to align with your state requirements for submitting those records. Something, investigate why those records are being held at the various agency levels. And we actually have a new dashboard that will help you to explore this information more, and it's called the Submission Lag Dashboard. Now, I'm not going to take too much time on this dashboard because this will be covered on the V3 implementation call tomorrow. So we are encouraging you to come back for that conversation. But I just wanted to show you that I have blotted out the agencies, the worst performing agencies for this particular, for this screenshot, as well as the best performing agencies. But you'll get this dashboard per state. Each of you should have a copy of this. If you're submitting, of course, you should receive this particular information in your dashboard. Let's see what's next. Okay. So
Monet, the V3
yes.
call is actually next Wednesday.
Okay, thank you. I apologize. I wanted to let you know about this best practices document. This is actually sent out every week. We send a little summary of those XML documents that have been submitted to the TAC. And there's a short little paragraph about thank you for updating your resources. And there's a link to this best practices document. So take a look at this. That Schematron checker tool that Josh described is actually, there's a link for that in this particular document. Now, I know I'm going fast because we're running out of time, but I wanted to ask you to participate in a quick survey. If you want to go ahead and copy this information, we're going to do a poll everywhere survey, and then you can also text this information. So I'll give you a few minutes to grab that information. Someone give me a thumbs up when you have it. Thumbs up, anybody? Ready? Okay, perfect. Okay. Additional best practices or ideas to reduce the documentation burden on managers, agencies, and providers. We're always looking for opportunities to help you. This has been a lot of information that we've covered today, and I know that you guys are already swamped with multiple tasks in your offices. Some of you are really short-staffed with just maybe 1 or 2 people in your office. But the TAC is here. We also have resources from the DCC. So we would love to help you, and we just need to know what you need help with, how we can help you. If you want to go ahead and provide some responses. And if you can't get the responses to populate here, then please add it to the chat and let us know what we can do. Again, I have reached out to several folks to ask if I can help them with their facility list. If you get the list, I promise that I will help you get it loaded onto the NEMSIS website and onto your state page. If you're looking to fix your DEM files, I have created a document that describes the 35 mandatory elements that need to be collected in the DEM file. And so, Ms. Judy, you and I will work on that together. But if you let us know how we can help you, we do have resources. We have a couple of people on our team. We have some new people coming on, and we're here. That's what we're here for. So I'm not seeing the responses populate yet, but I will let you know that we are trying to utilize our ticketing system a little better. And so if you would like to submit your information or your request to this ticketing system, then we will submit that information to the appropriate team member who can answer your questions and provide the additional assistance. All right, we have 1 minute remaining, and I'm eager to hear from someone who has not yet spoken up to tell us what you would like us to do to help you. Any takers? Okay, again, this information was presented pretty fast, but you can always reach me. Go to the support tab and look for state support, and you can contact me directly, or you can submit your information through this nemsis.org. Please join us for the V3 implementation call next week. Hi, Dan.
Hey,
How
Monet.
can I help you, my friend?
Yeah, I just had one suggestion, and you may have already gotten it covered, is all the great things that were covered in this session today, the things that are sort of to-do list things that the states, tools the states can use, tools we can access, things we need to do to help improve our demographic data, all those things. If there could just be a library of very simple, like bulletized step-by-steps that we could just go to. We go, I need to do that, because then there's always the thing of I need to do it, and then I got to recreate how to do it based on my notes or this or that. That includes links and everything, and that way, when we know we need to do something, we just whip through that, and we don't have to bug you. We don't have to set up a webinar. We can just kind of do it. So some kind of a library of those things over time, and you may already have one. I think that would be real helpful for me anyway, and possibly some of the other data managers.
That's an excellent idea. Thank you, Dan. I'm going to start working on that, and then I'm going to check in with you to ensure that it looks the way you want and that I haven't missed anything.
Yeah, happy to provide feedback or partner with you on that. And sorry to lay extra work at your feet. I know you're as busy as the rest of us, but I think that could really, if you guys want those types of practices to really be adopted, I think that might be a good tool for making it happen.
That's a fantastic idea. I really appreciate you jumping on and talking to us live about that. I love that yellow sweater, and I am definitely going to start working on that with my team. So thank you so much again for that suggestion.
Okay.
Okay. We're at the hour. I know you're all busy, so reach out. I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you, Josh. Thank you all for all your questions. Josh, do you have any final words?
Nope, just thanks for being here.
All right, everyone have a great day. Take care. Be safe.